welcome to Q&A. I'm Tom Ballard, filling in for Tony Jones. This week, the ABC is on the road to profile regional and rural Australia, and so we're coming to you live from the Empire Theatre in Toowoomba, southern Queensland. Here to answer your questions tonight, the Mayor of the Garden City, Paul Antonio, the Shadow Minister for Agriculture, Joel Fitzgibbon, the Vice-Chancellor of Southern Queensland University, Jan Thomas, Queensland singer-songwriter Katie Noonan, and the Minister for Rural Health, Fiona Nash. Please welcome our panel. Thank you very much. We've also got a very lively Toowoomba audience, I should mention that too. There's much to discuss, from infrastructure to refugees. Later on, we've even got some live music for you. But our first question tonight is from Brendan Bogle.
Too often regional areas are ignored by the Conservatives because they're considered safe. Labor gives it a crack but ignores them because they're considered unwinnable, and the Greens run often unrealistic campaigns and are never really taken seriously. When will regional Australia receive the funding and the focus that is needed to rebuild our communities? Thank you.
Thank you, Brendan. I want to go to the whole panel on this, but I'll start with Fiona Nash. Fiona, you're a Senator for the Nationals. You're all about speaking up for country Australia. What's your response to a constituent there who feels like they don't really have a voice in Canberra?
Well, I'm very sad he actually feels like he hasn't got a voice in Canberra, because I know there is some discontent out there, but I can tell you that the Nationals and the Liberals are absolutely focused on rural communities, whether it's looking at the agriculture white paper, $4 billion, $500 million for dams, the things that we've been fighting for years out there in the communities are going to continue, making sure that we've moved to better labelling of food so that we're supporting our producers, making sure that we're getting our young doctors, our young medicos out into the regions. And I think while there is a bit of concern out there, I think we can point to very many things that we're actually doing and will continue to do.
Do you get a sense from some electorates in the country that there is a sense of dissatisfaction with the Nationals' voice for regional and rural Australia over the past little while?
Well, I think always you're going to get people that aren't happy perhaps with how things are going in certain areas. I think that's the same for all parties. But when I talk to people out in the ground about the Nationals, they say, thanks very much for sticking up for us, for making sure ADM didn't take over GrainCorp. They say, thanks very much for sticking up for us, making sure we've got this food labelling. Thanks very much for sticking up for us, making sure we've got $4 billion for agriculture. Thanks for sticking up for us and getting free trade agreements that are going to open up more markets, more capacity for our farmers to do overseas trade. I mean, there's really, really good things that are happening, and that's what a lot of people are raising with me.
Joel Fitzgibbon, the questioner mentioned that Labor ignores regional areas because they consider those seats and electorates unwinnable. Your response to that?
Well, Tom, I'll skip the election pitch and resist the temptation of
asking
Fiona to...
All right, everybody settle down, please. It's the first question. Let's take our time.
Asking Fiona to authenticate some of those claims she just makes. Brendan has asked a very, very serious question about the connection between electoral outcomes and, I suppose, outcomes in our local communities. And it is true, if we are being honest with ourselves, that the coalition parties sometimes find Labor seats too hard to seriously contest, and vice versa. Very often, the Labor Party doesn't put as much effort into some rural seats that I would like to see put in, because it is just too difficult and resources are thin. Happily, I think it's changing, and I've been engaged in a project over the last couple of years of re-energising Labor's efforts in the seats which we probably can't win, at least not in a one-term strategy, maybe a two-term strategy. But what I like about that is it brings contestability to those seats, and with contestability comes a bigger effort from the incumbent party, and that goes to the second part of Brennan's question. When you get that contestability, then you'll get better local outcomes in infrastructure, in services, whatever it might be the community's looking for.
Paul Antonio, from a local council level, do you get frustrated at all when you're working with state or federal bodies and you're talking about issues that face people in the bush?
Absolutely, Brendan. For once, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think for too long, this nation has been governed around marginal seats. We've been crying out for a bypass here in Toowoomba for so long. When you realise that half of what goes out of the Port of Brisbane makes its way through the streets of Toowoomba, we needed that a long time ago. We need good rail. And you know, the kind of things like the inland rail, they ought to be on the national stage. Forget the politics, it's good for the country. But, you know, we got that bypass because Ian Macfarlane, our local member, was in fact in Cabinet and close to the Prime Minister. I'm sorry. I'm sorry it is. If you want to go and have a really hard look at it, he was the one who got it. There would have been no doubt, had there been a different government in power, we would not have got the bypass.
I want to come to
now,
the rest of the panel.
We've got the bypass, and it's going to make a profound difference to this community. That bypass is the bypass to a lot of places. It really should have been built years ago. We are not competitive when product leaves the farm gate. And part of the reason is we have not got the infrastructure. We have been neglected.
We'll have a chance to talk further about infrastructure later in the program, but Brendan wants a chance to quickly respond.
Well, Tom, I asked an honest question. We need an honest answer. Mr Macfarlane rolled this out over a series... The problem is that bypass was used as an election ploy. We need honesty, Mayor. I know that you're trying hard, but as for Fiona, her side has not done well in this town. They've let us down. We need honesty.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm sorry, Fiona, I have to come to the rest of the panel. I'm sure a lot of these issues will come out throughout the discussion, but Katie Noonan, you've travelled all over this country and you follow politics closely. Do you think that regional Australia has a voice?
I don't think the voice is loud enough. I actually live in regional Australia myself. I live near a wonderful town called Yamundi. I live in paradise, but I can see how hard it is there in terms of jobs. There's a lot of FIFO, fly in, fly out dads, because there's not enough local work in these small towns. But my main thing that I'd like to ask both parties is if you do care about regional towns, why don't you care about the farmers and their farms and protect them from...
We are going to come to those issues I think that you're hinting at there. Jen Thomas, I'll come to you. Is it also a matter of representation? It's been mentioned on this program before. Our last Prime Minister from the bush was Malcolm Fraser, who actually represented my electorate, Warrnambool in country Victoria. He was our last Prime Minister from the bush. I mean, do you think, can you see another Bush PM in the future?
I think the success of Australia actually depends on the success of regional Australia. In actual fact, around about 2/3 of our GDP comes from regional Australia, and around more than 1/3 of Australians live in regional Australia. And as we move into a transitional economy and start diversifying the various sectors that we need to diversify, regional Australia becomes more and more important for the success of Australia. Just think about, you know, agribusiness and supply chain logistics and tourism. A lot of that, a lot of those sectors come out of regional Australia. So we really need to make sure that regional Australia is as successful as we can make it for the success of Australia generally. And there are challenges in the bush, no doubt, but I think all of Australia needs to take account of some of these changing nature of the industries that all of Australia needs to be concerned with. And so I actually think the actual future of Australia is reliant on some of the solutions that will be found in the bush. So I actually think it's a bigger question than just representation. Actually, the solutions for Australia's competitiveness are actually to be found in the bush.
We'll stay on the topic of infrastructure. Our next question comes from Peter Pike.
To the panel. Recently, a local entrepreneurial family, the Wagners, showed extraordinary leadership and they built in Toowoomba's backyard an international airport. And good on them. Instead of waiting 5 decades like Badgerys Creek, we have an international airport, which will blend with the bypass and the Port of Brisbane through to Darwin, through to Perth, transport hub. But what about the next lot of big ideas? What about drought-proofing Australia? What about the Bradfield scheme? Where are the next big ideas coming from?
Okay, we'll get to the big ideas in a sec. I want to go to Paul Antonio. I know this airport is a matter of great local pride and pride for yourself. Can you tell us about that project particularly and the other big ideas for this region and regional Australia generally?
Look, I think the airport indicates to me something that's very, very special for this community. For the Wagners to invest their money, not yours and mine, and don't forget there's not been an airport built in Australia since Tullamarine of this standard. But for the Wagner family, who are an inspirational family, to build an airport that will connect us, we're within 12 hours flying time of half of the world's population. The Wagners Airport is also within 24 hours by road of 85% of Australia's population. So that comes together to give us tremendous opportunity to be an intermodal hub. And look, I commend the Wagners for what they've done. The Wagner story is an amazing Australian story. The hard work of Mary and Henry, the rearing of those children in hard circumstances, giving them a lesson in life where they've gone ahead and they've invested their money in an airport that's of international standard. This is one of the greatest leaps of faith I've ever seen by any family in their community.
Are there big ideas like that coming from government as well?
Look, if the government was doing it, when would they start? What would they do? At any level of government, including mine.
You know you're in government, right?
I know. I've got to confess that we've got a fair few boxes to tick as we go on our journey. But Wagner's built that airport in 19 months and 11 days. Sod turning, from the sod turning until they actually had CASA approval. Try the airport in Sydney. That's been a bit longer than that. Try the Brisbane airport. It's absolutely amazing what they've done for this community, and I'm very, very proud that they've done it, and I'm proud to be Mayor of Toowoomba at a time when they've done it.
Jen Thomas, big ideas in this regional area that you see or would like to see?
Well, I think we're seeing a little bit of that right now, and I think if I reflect back on 14th of September this year, I think we had what I would call our national WD-40 moment. Until then, we had this kind of jarring, mechanical, ghastly jamming sound coming out of Canberra. But on that day, we had spraying of WD-40.
I get it.
And the machinery of government suddenly started to flow again, and we started to have discussion. Now, innovation has suddenly become a word that we're starting to talk about. Innovation is something that universities can play a key role in and have been playing a key role in through our research. So universities stand ready to work with government, to work with industry, to drive innovation. And the research that's conducted by our universities in Australia has something of the order of billions of dollars worth of value to Australia. And that's even without, with declining government funding, we're still contributing billions of dollars through our research. Now, if that can be driven to drive new ideas, to drive commercialisation, to drive innovation by working with our universities, with our businesses, with our government, we can actually come up with really smart ideas that will change the nature of business, change the nature of our economy, change our society for the better. So our universities stand ready, willing and able to help Australia transform in the way that our Prime Minister is talking about right now. And I'm looking forward to that. So big ideas, bring them on. I reckon we're ready for them. Our universities are ready for them.
Fiona, Nash, is it a matter of incentivising that kind of investment? Are there enough incentives out there to make businesses invest in the bush and bring those big ideas out here?
Well, it's a fantastic example here, obviously, with the airport, for people that do have the capacity to invest to be able to do it. And I think we've got to start believing in our regional communities. Far too many people are talking our regional communities down, that they're not places to be, that they're not excellent places to live. I mean, I live in a rural community. I know exactly what they're like. So we've got to talk them up so people feel confident to actually invest in those communities. And back to Peter's question where he's talking about water. Absolutely, it's this coalition government that's got $500 million on the table for water infrastructure. We have to have the capacity to store water so that we can look to the future, that we can have projects, that we can have the vision. And it's something that's been lacking for too long.
Joel Fitzgibbon?
Well, Tom, if you want to understand the local community, come and talk to local leadership. And I had a discussion with the Mayor today. I met John Wagner and I met with the local economic development body. The Wagner example is a very, very good one. Regional communities don't ask for all that much. They only ask for their fair share, having Jen made the point that they make such a contribution to GDP. Every regional community I go to, though, has a project. I think the former Labor government made a very wise choice when it decided to, if you like, depoliticise these things, and we started with a discussion about the strength of representation and established Infrastructure Australia so that it could assess each project on its merits. In other words, assessing its benefit and costs and analysis of that, and then prioritise projects on that basis. I think that's a very good thing. But what is becoming very, very clear is that as Australians, we want to build more, and we need to build more to maintain our regional and international competitiveness, but we don't want to pay more tax. That's why Bill Shorten's been talking about some new financing vehicles beyond the budget bottom line, but, for example, putting up a fund which allowed the private sector to leverage off that money to bring some of these projects forward. I mean, agriculture was mentioned. There's a very reputable report which suggests that to fully capitalise on the opportunities presented in Asia, the enormous food demand there, we will need $600 billion, that's with a B, $600 billion of infrastructure investment in agriculture and agribusiness by 2050. You don't have to be an economist or a rocket scientist to work out that that money is not all going to come from government. As Jan says, we need to be more innovative, more creative, and find new ways of financing these projects.
We actually have a question now about maybe a potential dark side to development. Our next question is from Sean Hennessy.
Regional cities such as Toowoomba are expected to grow significantly over the coming years. How can these cities grow without experiencing the downsides of growth, such as more traffic and parking problems, and lose the things that make the cities attractive in the first place?
Eddie Noonan.
Well, yeah, that's a really tricky question. I am not really sure that I'm qualified to answer that question, but somehow I guess you've got to find the balance between all the things that are great about the cities and then all the things that are great about not living in the city, and try to find the meeting point in between. I guess Toowoomba is very much a growing city, and as the cities get more expensive, people are going to be looking for alternative places to live that they can afford. I have no idea.
Jan Thomas, you've written about this. No, that's okay.
Oh, yeah.
You've written about this. You've talked about this wave of refugees from the cities that are going to come to the country. Is the development and the growth there a potential threat to the way of life that people love about living in regional Australia?
Well, Australia is one of the most urbanised cities in the world, and I think naturally people will start to look for alternate places as the big cities become mega cities, and it becomes more and more difficult to get around them, and housing becomes very expensive in places like Sydney and so on. And Toowoomba's a very fine example of a city that's got a really good balance. It's got very low unemployment, 4.4%. I think the Mayor will check me for my fact accuracy there, but 4.4% is lower than many areas of Brisbane, for example. It's easy to get around, it's very beautiful, 2 hours to the beach. Those sorts of things make it a very livable city. Regional universities such as mine have very, very high employment rates for graduates, very high mean salaries. So for young professionals starting out, these can be very attractive places to locate. And so I think as people start becoming more discerning about where they live, regional centres such as Toowoomba will become quite attractive places to live. And it's all around planning, isn't it, really? Making sure that you understand what makes a place livable, what matters in terms of place, identity, culture, the arts. Places like this beautiful facility that we're in now are preserved and cherished, that transportation, public transport and so on are encouraged so that people can all enjoy the fruits of this beautiful country, Australia.
Paul Antonio, is Toowoomba ready for that huge surge and that huge growth?
One of the really big issues that we have to face as an elected council is to make absolutely sure we get the forward planning right. That's not an easy job. What we think is dead right now, in 100 years' time mightn't be right. But look, we're doing some very serious strategic planning. We're going to our community and we're in fact working through the Toowoomba West plan, where we believe Toowoomba will expand to the west. I had a briefing on that today, which indicated very clearly to me the good work that's been done about planning our future, leaving spaces that need to be left, having areas, having the connectivity. But one thing that we really are conscious of in council is the livability of Toowoomba. It's a beautiful place to live. It's a family-friendly city. It's got everything going for it. We need, in our planning, going forward, to make sure we preserve that livability.
Can I just make one quick point that wasn't made by any of the other contributors? And it is, of course, about planning, and it's best done when the planning comes from the bottom up, not dictated by Canberra or indeed Brisbane. But broadband and telecommunications was one point not just mentioned now. It will be the big enabler. It will close the city-country divide, and we need to get that policy right.
Yeah.
We have to move on. You're watching Q&A live from Toowoomba. I'm Tom Ballard, filling in for Tony Jones, who'll be back with you next week in this chair. Our next question comes from Helen Bender.
My question to the panel is, on Saturday, we buried my father after struggling for 10 years against the CSG industry and Link Energy. So when? When will farmers be given the right to say no to the CSG companies from coming onto their land? When?
Thank you. I'll come to the panel in a second. Helen, thank you very much for your question. We appreciate that, and our sympathies go to you and your family at this very difficult time. For viewers at home who may not be aware, George Bender was a 68-year-old farmer who took his own life 10 days ago after a 10-year battle against CSG on his land. The story's obviously rocked the community here in Toowoomba. Joel Fitzgibbon, the question that his daughter puts to you: when are farmers going to be given the right to say no to coal seam gas extraction happening on their land?
Yeah, well, thanks, Tom, and of course I join with you in extending my condolences to Helen and the family. It's a very sad case. I don't know all of the detail, but of course everyone across the nation knows basically the circumstances. Look, this is a very difficult question. We've been dealing with, I'm the member for Hunter in the Hunter Valley, and I've been dealing with land use conflict for many years. I have a lot of coal mining, some CSG, but I have enormous, a large agriculture sector, thoroughbred breeding, viticulture, the list goes on. And some of those coal mines are getting very close to some of those sustainable industries. I've always had the view, even though I'm a strong supporter of the coal mining industry, that we can't allow any of those industries to develop at the expense of our sustainable industries. I mean, the coal mines, CSG might be with us for 100 years maybe, but our sustainable industries hopefully will be there to sustain us for many thousands of years. So that's the first point I'd like to make. This entry into land thing's a very difficult one. I'm not avoiding the question, but it's a state-based issue.
I'm sorry, I think that's a cop-out.
Well, no. Well, you didn't let me finish.
I'll come to you in a sec, Katie, and I'll let you finish your point. I mean, the point is there that is Labor state government here in Queensland that is approving.
I prefaced my remarks, but I'm not avoiding the question, but it is a state-based issue, and it's a complex one, because our country has enjoyed enormous wealth through the extraction of coal and iron ore and other commodities, and now CSG. And it's been a tenet of or foundation of our legal system for all of our history that companies wanting to exploit that will have access to those resources under the land of others. So I think my short answer is, if you like, that aspect of it, in my view, to be honest, is not going to change anytime soon, because the extraction of those resources are too significant to the national economy. I think that's the honest answer.
But hang on.
I'll come to Katie Noonan. Thank you. I understand there's a lot of passion around this issue, but we would need to hear from all our panellists. Thanks, Katie.
Well, first of all, I just want to say I'm not a politician. I'm just an average Aussie like everyone else. And I think the CSG drama was something that's so big and depressing that I kind of put my head in the sand for quite a few years, because I just was like, to me it just seems so incredibly stupid on so many levels. And I just can't, the state government has let down everyone here and everyone in this state for years. And I think palming it off to making it a state problem is, as I said, a cop-out. It's a national problem. We can't survive without farmers. Farmers aren't allowed to say no to these multinational companies that come into their land that they've had for generations. They don't know the health impacts. They don't know the water impacts. Poor George, the tragedy there is so obvious. It is a matter of national importance. It can't keep on being palmed off.
Fiona, Nash, I want to come to you there. Isn't that the point too, that is a unity ticket largely, or there's bipartisan support for these industries? Your response to what Katie had to say
And
there?
also, doesn't all the money for the particular stuff around here, we don't get it. The state government gets like a royalty, but most of it goes overseas. You're not getting it, I'm not getting it.
I'll come to Fiona Nash to respond, please. Thanks.
And I'll get to that. But I firstly want to extend my condolences as well and join with you guys in doing that. The answer's simple. Farmers should be able to say no. And state governments should change whatever needs to be changed so that they can say no.
But that's not your party's policy.
But that's my view. That is my view.
I just need to hear Fiona Nash.
And that is my view. I was asked for my view on this, and that is my view. And they should be able to, if anybody puts themselves in the position of being a farmer on a piece of land To not have the right to say no, in my view, is wrong. Now, Joel, sometimes you have different views to your party. We don't have a definitive view around this because it is a state issue, but I'm giving you my very clear view that that's what it should be.
Do you prosecute that point of view in your party room and to
Absolutely,
your
I do.
colleagues?
Absolutely,
But as
I
National
do.
Health Minister, why can't you recognise it as a national health disaster?
Well, actually, on the health issue, I'm sorry, I need to come to this, if possible, on the question of health. Our next question comes from Karen Orty. Karen.
Multiple international peer-reviewed medical reports confirm the health impacts among residents close to gas infrastructure. In the gas fields around Chinchilla, our children's noses are bleeding. They have rashes and they can't sleep for the headaches. In March 2013, Queensland Health recommended measurement of the total gas field emissions and the exposure of the residents to those emissions. 2.5 years have passed. The health impacts continue and nothing has been done. Fiona Nash, what are you going to do?
Fiona Nash.
Thanks, John. Well, firstly, I don't agree that nothing's being done. The Department of Environment is doing exactly work around that at the moment. Yes, they are. Yes, they are, around in the health impacts of CSG from the chemicals. They are. But there's no doubt we need to do more. I'm a big supporter of mining where it's appropriate. And where it's appropriate and where it works, where there's no impact on primary land and where there's no risk to aquifers, it should go ahead for the reasons that Joel's pointing out of the benefits to the economy. But where there are health impacts, we need the work to be done to show us. Now, I know that there is existing work already, but we need to build on that to get a clear and proper picture exactly of what these health impacts are. And from my view, in all of this, we should take the precautionary principle, we should be conservative, and things should be on hold until they can be proven not to have an impact, in my view.
Paul Antonio, I'm going to come to you. The sad death of George Bender prompted Senator Glenn Lazarus to call for a royal commission into this issue and a moratorium on all CSG activities until the results of that commission are released. Your thoughts on that suggestion and also, I guess, your personal stake in this particular issue?
Well, look, I'd also share the concerns of the Bender family about it, and my deepest sympathy to each and every one of you. Look, I've been very concerned. I think I'm gone on record over a number of occasions, firstly about the very best agricultural land in the Toowoomba Regional Council area, which is a target for the gas companies. It's that highly developed irrigation land along the Condamine River, and I don't personally think they ought to touch it. That's my view. I have friends who don't agree with my stance, but it's been consistent since day one. Look, the other thing that sort of scared me a little bit, I was listening to a presentation by a gas company once, and my hometown of Mulmerran depends very heavily on underground water to keep the intensive animal industries going. 140, 150 jobs, the Hall family, once again another iconic family, doing their work there. They talked about dewatering the Walloon coal measures. Now, I don't know whether they've got a different meaning on dewatering, but when I challenged them on that, they suddenly found a different meaning to dewatering. Dewatering means to me taking that water away, destroying that other industry. I'll say one thing to wind up. When the history of this region is written in 100 years' time, the resource sector will be but a blip on the screen. Agriculture has been dominant from day one and is a critical thing in the future. We need to preserve it.
Jan Thomas, I want to come to you. You're keen to see greater research into this area from universities like the one that you're the Vice-Chancellor of?
And again, my condolences, and indeed my heart goes out to communities generally. The resilience of communities is very strong in Queensland, but it's at a breaking point for many reasons, and this is one of the reasons that's adding to the challenges that our communities face. And I want to just, I guess, bring it back to what I think is one of the biggest global challenges that we have, and that is around clean food and clean water security. That is something that we will look for in coming generations and centuries as really something that's a treasure, and Australia will need to hold on to its food and hold on to its clean water as a treasure. And we have right underneath us here the Great Artesian Basin as one of the largest underground water sources, stretches across much of Queensland and into the Northern Territory and South Australia. Now, as a clean water source, that will be something that's essentially a jewel for Australia that we need to hold for generations to come. And we also have, through various reasons, including the urban sprawl, challenges to some of our richest agricultural land, which will produce our clean food of the future. And so clean food and clean water security is something that I think every Australian needs to be concerned about. It will become, if it's not now, an absolutely precious commodity. So we need to make sure that whatever we do, we invest in research that underpins making sure that that is sustainable. Social science and science research to preserve that for future generations. Our university is doing it, as is other universities. We need to make sure that science continues to make sure that all of our industries can guarantee that our food and water, our soil maintains its capacity to grow clean food for the future, that our water remains usable and clean for the future, and that we have the capacity for multiple industries to cohabit.
We do need to move on in a second, but I just very quickly want to get a response from both the politicians on the panel about your response to Glenn Lazarus's suggestion of a Royal Commission into this issue.
Well, I absolutely agree that there'll be some projects that can be undertaken without a threat to water and other resources, and some which will not. And those which pose any sort of threat should not proceed. But I think Katie was a little bit unfair saying I was flogging things off, referring to the state government. We do have a constitution. The Commonwealth has certain powers and the states have certain powers, including those over access to land. Now, John Howard, to his credit, as Bob Hawke did with the Gordon below Franklin Dam all those years ago, found a way of using the Commonwealth's power to reach further into some of these issues. So he produced in the EPBC Act a trigger on flora and fauna. So the Commonwealth, for the first time, had some say in some of these mining projects, for example. We very recently extended that to include a water trigger. So that any project, any CSG project in Queensland where there's a water threat, the decision now has to go to an independent scientific committee in Canberra and has to secure the approval of the Commonwealth Minister. So we are trying to reach further in, there's no doubt about that, but these are very difficult issues.
Fiona Nash?
I'm not convinced that a Royal Commission would do what I think people would be asking it to do, which is get a better understanding of what the actual impacts of CSG are. I think there's better ways to do that. I think it is through research. I think it is through greater independent scientific work around really determining what those impacts are. And I do have to just say to Katie, just to say, you said earlier that I don't care about farmers, and I've really got to pull you up on that.
No, that word never, that sentence did not.
Sorry, I thought you said, why don't you care about farmers?
You are the National Health Minister.
Oh, okay.
And the health implications, as indicated by the question over there, the obvious mental health implications that are indicated by this tragedy in our community, absolutely. I just can't see how that doesn't become. I mean, look, I'm not a politician, but for me, this is a national disaster. And
I'm going to give the final word, actually. I'd like to come back to Helen Bender, if possible. Helen, if I could come back to you. Listening to the response from the panel, I'd be interested to know if you're satisfied, or your thoughts or your reflections on what this panel had to say to your question.
One of the last things my father said was, no one is listening. Why am I wasting my time? So I don't think you are listening. I don't think anyone is listening. I don't think the nation is listening, and certainly I don't think any single one of you politicians have listened, nor cared, nor want to care. You're a turntable. You walk in, you walk out. You walk the walk, you talk the talk, and you're just here for show. You're not listening. You have not once come out. Come and talk to this lady. Come and have a look at the effects of her children. Then you might make a real decision, you might actually make a change. But right now, no one is listening.
Okay, well, it's quite a challenge. I'm sorry, I understand you'd like to respond to that, but we do need to keep moving on. Thank you again to the Bender family for being here tonight. You're watching Q&A. I'm Tom Ballard, filling in for Tony Jones. Our next question comes from Alan Marsh.
My question is to the Mayor, Paul Antonio. You have stated that Toowoomba will play its part in resettling some of the 12,000 Syrian refugees that are due into Australia by the end of the year. What strategies have been implemented to assist refugees in adapting to our democratic laws and system of government, and what is being done to ensure that they contribute positively to the social cohesion of Toowoomba and to the economic growth of the city, rather than become welfare dependent?
Paul Antonio. Thank you, Toowoomba. Thank you very much. You understand the passion about it.
Thank you for your question, Alan. I'm delighted that you've asked me that. I came out the other day in a very measured way and said that we would play our part of the national effort to resettle some of these people. Now, I don't know... I don't know if you've met many of these people, but last night I had the occasion to talk to 4 young refugees. And they are so excited about being Australians. They're so exciting about the opportunity. Yes, they've got a different skin colour to what I've got, but they're fine young people and they want a chance. You will remember that the former Prime Minister, Tony Abbott, made it very, very clear that we'd be bringing people out of Syria who, in fact, were at risk. Well, who's at risk in Syria? I've, in recent times, met a couple of people from over that way who were Coptic Christians, and they are as fine a people as I've ever met. Look at our own background, where we came from. There were people in our background who came out here in chains, who probably came out here because they were persecuted. But quite frankly, Toowoomba has put up its hand. Last year, we took 117 refugees. We have things in place in this city, due to the good heart of this city, due to the spirit in this city, to look after those people. And you see it happening all the time. Yes, there may be a few that are having trouble assimilating, and their journey to become Australians is far more difficult than my forebears, that's for sure. It's far more difficult, considering the trauma. A young man came to see me the other day, lovely young man, studying at our university, doing international relations. And what happened to him? His journey, his dad was a pilot. He was flying the president around, bang, shot down, dead, gone. He and his mother and his brother and his sister had to leave that day. Had to leave their country that day. They've been on a journey since then. And in talking to that young man, he's delighted that he's here in Australia, enjoying our freedoms, enjoying this famous culture that we have here that I think is second to none. And I'm not going to look into the eyes of those little people on TV and think that they could even be my grandchildren, you know, who are in that terrible situation, who have been shot at, who have been abused and goodness knows what, and are in threat of dying. I'm not going to put up with that. I'm going to bring whoever, we'll do our share here in Toowoomba, principally because we are set up beautifully to accept refugees. We have a number of groups in town who look after those refugees, who will and who have. And we've got a whole lot of people who are supporting these people, and quite frankly, I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to wear this one right on the chin.
Katie Noonan, this is an issue that you're very passionate about. Some people here tonight are also very passionate indeed. Aren't there specific challenges, though, resettling asylum seekers and refugees in regional Australia? Are there particular challenges that the regional Australia has to face in that task?
I mean, I guess the challenges, the most profound challenges are the social and cultural differences, and of course the language and just assimilating into our beautiful Australian way of life. I'm not sure about the difference between regional and city, you know, personally. I've only really lived in the country the last few years, but I think it's so wonderful what you're saying, and I hope that mayors of a lot of other cities around Australia take note and go to Toowoomba. That's awesome.
Jan Thomas, the question went to the systems put in place to assimilate or to resettle asylum seekers and refugees in the local community. How do you do that? What are the challenges? And the question also mentioned this idea of avoiding welfare dependency. Do you think that's a perception that's widespread in Toowoomba or the region?
Well, I'm really passionate about education, and clearly education is a key transformative mechanism for anybody, but in particular for refugees. And, you know, it is a bridge out of poverty for people, and learning English language is a key part of that, and then obviously getting qualifications so that people can go on and get jobs. So the university in this community plays a key role in that for refugees, for example, and their families. So any education provider plays a key role in assisting in that assimilation. And for our university, for example, we have students from 90 different countries right across the world, and staff from right across the world too. So that obviously assists in helping people acclimatise into a community like Toowoomba. And then the Toowoomba community is very multicultural in and of itself. It has very many faiths, and they come together on quite a regular basis to ensure that the community continues to share, develop common understanding, to continue to drive Toowoomba into a city that's basically focusing on a shared understanding of peace and harmony. And that doesn't always work, but most of the time it does, and we've been very successful so far.
Joel Fitzgibbon, is there a need to change the focus or the perception of this fear of asylum seekers being a burden in some way to regional communities and seeing them their introduction as an economic opportunity as well?
Yeah, I think that's right, and I applaud the Mayor and all those regional communities around Australia, actually, who have been reaching out or putting their hand up and saying, yeah, we'd be very happy to have our share. And, you know, the fact that you're fleeing civil war or persecution, that doesn't mean that you're not respectful of other cultures. It doesn't mean that you don't have a good work ethic, and it certainly doesn't necessarily mean that you don't bring good skills with you. And many of those skills can be and will be very important in regional communities, and I think people are most prepared to assimilate. One of the mistakes we've made, of course, in the past is too many of our migrants have congregated in the capital cities, and I think it would be a wonderful thing if we saw more of them making their way to the regions where we need their skills, we need their contributions, including their cultural contributions. Look at the Greeks and the Italians and the Vietnamese brought for our food culture alone.
And music culture.
And there is absolutely, and there is a lot we can gain from their participation in our local communities.
Tom, I've just missed a little bit, and I think there's a lot of people working with music, with sport, bringing these people together. And look, quite frankly, one of the things I do in a citizenship ceremony now is just forget about the script and for just about 2 or 3 minutes, tell them something from the heart about being an Australian, how they're coming here to enjoy the freedoms that didn't come for free. And I invite them to come along to Anzac Day and commemorate Anzac Day, invite them to Australia Day and celebrate what we are and who we are, and they're doing it.
But
they're
Tom,
doing it.
There was an important point in the question, though, and that is planning is, of course, critical.
Yeah.
And
who do you think is more of a threat to the Toowoomban way of life, Syrian refugees or Andrew Johns? Which way? I'm sorry, I'm a comedian, I had to take it, I apologise.
I'll stick to my Syrian refugee story.
Syrian refugee, thank you very much, Paul. And we need to move on. I'm Tom Ballard, you're watching Q&A, and I'm very clearly not Tony Jones. Tonight, Australia is listening to the people of Toowoomba, so let's take another question. Our next question comes from Jordana Colvin.
My question is to Fiona Nash. The effects of climate change disproportionately affect the agricultural industry more than any other in Australian society, as the scientific community warns of extreme changes in weather events, rising temperatures, and rising sea levels, posing a severe threat to the world's food security. Since the National Party claims to represent regional and rural Australia, why is your party refusing to aggressively combat climate change?
Fiona Nash.
Thanks for the question. Well, I think firstly, we do have targets to go to France at the end of the year between 26 and 28% reduction. No, hang on, let me finish.
France,
let me finish.
They're onto you there, Fiona.
We need to hear a finish. I will come to the rest of the panel. I know lots of people have
Seriously,
views
we'll get to you lot in a
All I
minute.
wanted to say is France has banned fracking, just so you know.
Okay, all right. We need to... Fiona Nash, let you finish.
Thank you. I'll get back to the answer. So we have got those targets. We have got those targets in place. But can I say we represent an awful lot of farmers out there, and our farmers are some of the best environmentalists we've got. And farmers know that if you don't look after the land, it's not going to look after you. So an awful lot of things are already being done by the farming community to deal with the changing climate. So we might not be having a discussion out there every day about what's causing it or what the science is behind it, but every single day, farming communities,
Fiona Nash,
communities are working, and we're working with them to deal with the effects of a changing climate.
Okay, very quickly, I'll come back to the question if that's all right, if you want to respond there.
Yeah, so what policy is your party going to implement to combat the effects of climate change, and especially on the agricultural industry? Which policies are you talking about?
Well, all of the work that we do with all of the work that we do with farmers to help them do the things I was just talking about in the white paper. So it's things like looking at how we prepare for drought, how we look at managing water in a preventative way on farm, how we encourage farmers to move to better practices like minimum tillage, how we actually work with farmers, and there are programs available to do things so that we can prepare for drought because we know that climate is changing. So we are doing those things in a practical way through the policies that we're putting in place, working with the farmers to do it.
Joel Fitzgibbon, I'll come to you. Do you think the National Party have an aggressive climate change policy?
Well, Tom, it's well known that the coalition's targets are an international embarrassment. That's the truth.
That's your view, Joel.
Okay, thank you.
That's your
But
view.
even more embarrassing was Fiona's claim that Barnaby Joyce's agricultural white paper addresses the issue, because it simply does not. It simply does not. Now, there are two issues here. One, of course, is the mitigation side, making our international contribution to the reduction of greenhouse emissions. And the other is adaptation, in ensuring that the land sector, as the questioner said, the most affected sector, the sector most affected by a changing climate is ready to adapt and embrace the newest technologies to best prepare it for what is going to be an even drier continent. So there is a lot of work to be done. It should be the absolute priority of this government, but sadly it's not.
Well, you're on record as saying that you'd like to depoliticise the issue of climate change. Is that actually possible to do? I mean, as we've demonstrated tonight, that's very tricky for politicians to do.
I've been on record a number of times of saying that I'd like to depoliticise agriculture and take a more bipartisan approach, to take agriculture out of the 3-year electoral cycle, because it's too important to be playing in that short cycle, and it does need long-term planning. Now, Barnaby makes it difficult for me from time to time, I have to say, and the white paper is Exhibit A, but we do need to get serious about working harder at making sure we are more resilient in agriculture, and we are more sustainable, both in terms of what's happening in the climate, but of course a whole range of issues about how we properly allocate our natural resources, water and soil resources.
You're coming a bit of heat, so I'll give you a chance to respond really quickly.
Thank you, Tom. Unfortunately, Joel has a bit of a credibility issue, because in his government, you actually cut agriculture $3.8 billion down to 1.7. It's not rubbish. Yeah, no. It's not rubbish. You banned the live exports trade, which decimated communities. Listen, it's okay, so you can throw it, but you can't take it.
Okay, all right, well, it seems like we're not exactly getting anywhere there, so we'll need to pull very quickly. Yes.
Can I just settle that argument, and just to give them a bit of an idea, give them a little bit of an idea of some of the things I think can help. You know, there's a 200 megawatt solar farm has had approval in the Toowoomba Regional Council area. Biggest solar farm in Australia. It will be built in stages, and it's about 100 k's west of here. But can I just suggest to both of you on either side of politics that the inland rail will save a lot of carbon, a lot of fuel, a lot of carbon. In fact, by 2050, 750,000 tonne of carbon per year will be saved if you build the inland rail. How about you both work together and do it?
This government's doing
it. That's again another one of these. Well, we need to move on, my friends. Please, children, please. I love you all. We need to move along. Remember, if you hear any doubtful or dodgy claims on Q&A, please send a tweet using the hashtag #FactCheck and Q&A. We'd appreciate it very much. The next question is on a much more serious topic, and we go to, a more serious tone, I should say, and it comes from Rhonda Miles. Rhonda.
Our 15-year-old epileptic son, Lachlan, has been on life support 7 times. He's been hospitalised 95 times in the last 4.5 years. He's endured 2 brain surgeries and has failed 11 seizure medications. Just this week, he's been in hospital twice. Just before we came into the auditorium, he was vomiting in the toilet from seizure activity. If Lachlan lived overseas, he would have access to quality-controlled medical cannabis oil under the supervision of a doctor. We welcome the Federal Health Minister's moves last week in her announcement that she will set up a farm-to-pharmacy medical cannabis production system in Australia by 2018. That doesn't help my son now. Why can't we import, through the Special Access Scheme and TGA, quality-controlled medical cannabis oil from overseas now?
Katie Noonan, I saw you nodding there. Katie Noonan, I saw you nodding there, along in agreement, yeah?
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, I don't know how these decisions are made, but it's a no-brainer for me. I don't see why, as a mother, I'm a mum, and I just can't imagine that pain at watching your child go through that. And if there's a source there that can help, I don't know why you can't. And why aren't we why aren't we farming that and making, profit from those things rather than...
Let's say that question to the Minister for Rural Health, Fiona Nash.
Thanks, Tom. And same, as a mother, it must just be so hard, and I really, really feel for you. That it has been step one, you're right, we have at least done step one now to move towards having the legislation so that we will be able to have cannabis grown for medicinal purposes. The special access scheme that exists, if there is a clinician that wishes to bring in a product that's not on the register of therapeutic goods, the capacity does exist to do that. So for those medicines that are overseas that actually aren't on our register.
Joel Fitzgibbon, legal in Canada, Finland, Israel, 23 US states. Why not here?
Yeah, and thanks for the question, Rhonda, and for what you do for Lachlan, and thanks for putting a human face on it. I'm going to keep my answer short. I'm not suggesting it's not complex. It is, but this thing just needs to be fixed, and it should be done. You have my support.
Jan Thomas, we should be clear, we're talking about medical marijuana tincture here, basically oil that's rubbed on the skin. It does seem to be extremely helpful for some people. Not in all cases, it's not a fix-all, but it is worth trying for a lot of people, it seems. Your thoughts?
Absolutely. I mean, many of our drugs that we can't use routinely are drugs of addiction. And so this is exactly the same as that, just used in a different form. It's a drug of addiction, but now used therapeutically. I cannot understand why it hasn't been in therapeutic use for years, in actual fact, and I cannot understand why it can't be imported, as the questioner has asked. It just blows your mind, given the research that's been available for it, why this one is any different to any of the other opiates that are available for ordinary therapeutic use under medical supervision.
Rhonda, I'd like to come back to you for a response, if that's okay. And also, could you maybe explain the criminal penalties people like yourself in your position might actually be facing if you would actually supply your child with what we're talking about?
Okay, in Queensland, supplying a drug to a minor is a serious charge. It comes with a maximum jail term of 25 years. In our case, we provide very high level of care for Lachlan. We have carers overnight in the home. If he went into a child safety system as a result of us being charged for breaking the law, then we would, in essence, be passing him into a system that couldn't meet his needs.
Can I ask for your thoughts on the response from the panel?
Okay, Fiona Nash, I'm aware of a number of medical patients who have special access schemes currently in. The problem at the moment is the TGA's inability to approve those cannabis applications. One of the ideas being put forward is that the state health ministers could get together with the federal health minister and import a bulk supply of tested, quality regulated products from overseas and make those products available to legitimate patients through their state health departments. We think that's a reasonable approach. It doesn't solve every patient need, and we get that because the medical cannabis debate is very broad. It deals with a whole range of different medical conditions, and it is not one size fits all. But let's make a start. Let's get these products from overseas that patients are already using now. You know, we need to get beyond this notion that we're talking about something new here. We
Okay,
are
thank you,
not.
Rhonda. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to take your suggestion there as a comment. We appreciate your time, and we do have to move on. I'm sorry, panel. This is Q&A live from Toowoomba in the Empire Theatre. I'm Tom Ballard. Our next question is from Adam Visser.
Anyone who works in rural and regional healthcare will tell you that obesity is a rapidly growing epidemic. It's now commonplace to have patients who weigh over 200 kilos admitted to our local hospital. However, obesity surgery remains the domain of hospitals in capital cities. When will we be given the funding to tackle our local problem locally? From a council point of view, why do we still have a system where the council collects a fee for fitness groups using local parks? And why did the council, against the tide of local opinion, recently give approval to the town's 7th McDonald's?
Paul Antonio, I'm going to come to you. This really is a local problem, a major challenge that you need to face. The Darling Downs population actually has the highest level of obesity in the country, according to the National Heart Foundation, and metropolitan areas tend to have actually lower levels of obesity and higher levels of activity. Your response to the question there?
Well, look, I think the Toowoomba Regional Council is not found wanting when it comes to active participation. There's a lot of facilities in parks that you don't have to pay for. We have to balance our books too. Yes, we do charge for our facilities. There's no question of that, and the reason is we've got to balance our books. But you'll find that there's a lot of active work being done. There's a thing called Park Run every Saturday morning in Toowoomba. There's a whole lot of very proactive things being done in most communities, including this one, for that. In terms of the McDonald's, you probably realise that that matter went to court and it was approved by the courts. Yes, I voted in favour of it because that was exactly what was going to happen. But it's going to be built now. And look, I've got to confess, 11 o'clock at night when I've been bellyached out all day, there's nowhere to eat any food. Yes, I go to McDonald's. And I get a quick meal. In fact, I got a bad one the other day and I rang them and told them. But, so I'm guilty. I'm quite happy to take that on the chin.
But how is local government tackling this real health?
Well, as I said, we've got some active stuff in parks where people can go. Try and go and have a look at the Wilsonton Park, which was recently built. A great facility for the broader community to go there and become active and do things that they need to do at no cost, paid for by the ratepayer. Yes, we've got facilities that they can use. We've got swimming pools, all that we charge for. But in saying that, there's plenty of... What about the people who run? What about the people who walk? All those sort of things. Plenty of opportunity.
McDonald's, it says. Yes, Thomas, I'm going to come to you really quickly. I need to bring in the Rural Health Minister here, Fiona Nash, quickly for your response on this issue. Is this a major issue that you're seeing in regional and rural Australia?
Look, it is. And one of the things that I'm really proud of is the Sporting Schools initiative that we've now got in place, $100 million. So refocusing young people on the importance of physical activity and providing the assistance to do that. But I think it's going to be a balance. Sure, governments need to look at what policies they can put in place, and local government, we're getting some examples there. But we've also got to get people to take responsibility for what they do. So for themselves and for their children, about educating them to make sure that they eat well.
Jen Thomas?
And I think employers have a responsibility here too. So my university would be one of the biggest employers in this region, nearly 2,000 staff. And we run health programs, so every staff member gets access to the gym for free, run lots of physical programs. We have a lot of mental health programs too, to make sure all our staff are both physically well and also mentally well. It's important for my business that that's the case.
Sean Fitzgibbon, quickly, and then we've got one last question.
And Fiona, you cut our healthy after-hours school program, but can I just say, I agree.
This from the man that didn't want to be political.
This is partly cultural, I agree with Fiona. And let me tell you a quick story. I went to Ararat, the town in regional Victoria. They'd appeared on The Biggest Loser, the television show. I went there, I don't know about you tonight, me, not wearing your joggers, but I went to the council building, the mayor's in sporting clothing, you walk through the town, everyone's losing weight. That program had such an enormous impact on this town. I couldn't believe it. It was transformational for the town. So it doesn't take much sometimes, but I agree with Fiona, it is a largely cultural problem, an education problem, and communities have to, I suppose, look to self-help.
Okay, we've got time for just one last question, and it's from Dan Fraser.
Firstly, thank you to the Q&A team for coming out to Toowoomba and letting us share a lot of our issues with a national audience. Also, because now that daylight savings has started down south, this is the only opportunity by attending live that we get to see the show as it happens. However, it would seem like it's been a really big effort on your part, not something we could ask you to do every week. Isn't it time that the southern states abandoned the ridiculous concept of daylight savings and simply get out of bed?
Abandoning daylight savings. Thank you, Dan. I'm very excited about going home and watching myself for an hour. I'm very excited. Paul Antonio, we're going to quickly go around the panel. Paul Antonio, your thoughts?
Look, well, I've lived through 1 year of daylight saving. It didn't do much for me. I'm quite happy where I am.
You're not worried about your curtains at all, no?
No, not at all. It doesn't really matter. Daylight till dark.
Joel Fitzgibbon?
You stole my line there.
No, I'm sorry.
But the cows in New South Wales are still milking on time.
Okay.
As well. No, over my dead body, I love daylight savings. We're staying right where we are.
Jen Thomas?
I'm from Western Australia. What can I say?
Yeah.
We're always behind.
Fair enough. Katie Noonan?
Queensland, we need it. I'm sick of all the changing.
All right, go the other way. Then you can watch Q&A in real time. Fiona Nash.
I know some people love it, but I'm a morning person. I hate daylight saving.
I'm a night owl, so yeah.
We're split. The tensions are high. Unfortunately, that's all we have time for tonight. Would you please thank our wonderful panel, Paul Antonio, Joel Fitzgibbon, Jan Thomas, Katie Noonan, and Fiona Nash. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, panel. Thank you, Katie. That's your cue. Thank you very much. We'd also like to thank the Good Burgers of Toowoomba for having us, particularly those of the Empire Theatre, so please give them and yourselves a big round of applause. Thank you, Toowoomba. Q&A's back next Monday night when Tony Jones will be joined by the new Minister for Education, Simon Birmingham, the Shadow Minister for Finance, Tony Burke, journalist, author, broadcaster and publisher, Wendy Harmer, businesswoman and founder of the diverse Australasian Women's Network, Di Lee, and American ecologist Paul Ehrlich, who's well known for his controversial warnings about population growth. We'll end tonight with Katie Noonan and guitarist Peter Koopman performing Gratitude from Katie's new album, Transmutant. Thanks for watching Q&A. Good night.
This is a song about loss, about losing someone you love, and I'd like to dedicate it to the Bender family. This is a song called Gratitude.
All these cycles of goodbye coming up again so soon. I am sorry you are alone. I knew there was something afoot, to dig too deep. We will all bury someone we love. Songs whispering that I didn't want to hear. Words were singing that I didn't want to speak. Cheeky